today NSF recipient and also a Ford Fellow herself, Rocío, who is a PhD candidate in cell biology here at Yale, soon to be doctor. Woo! And so Rocío and I were just talking about this, and we were thinking, like when did we actually meet? And so we actually go way back, the summer before my graduate school that happened for me because I was curious about this fellowship. And so since then, I've learned so much about the process, but I've also gotten to know Rocío, who is a really strong leader in sciences. She's extremely driven. And so I hope you guys will be as enlightened as I was about the Ford Fellowship, if not even more after today. So I've done a lot of talking, and so I just want to, let Rocío shine. So take it away.
Thank you, Daisy. Yeah, I can't believe that we've known each other for like so long, but that's how fast time goes when you're a graduate student. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to be here and share my knowledge about the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship with all of you. And please, as Daisy said, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I would like this to be like an interactive session as much as possible. So with that being said, my name is Rocío. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I am originally from Puerto Rico, for all of you out there that might be also from Puerto Rico. And I am a Ford Predoctoral Fellow from 2017, so it's been a while, but the process and the goals of this fellowship have not changed in these last years. So I feel like I can very effectively communicate what my experience has been, and I hope that that's going to be very helpful to all of you who are applying or thinking about applying this year or next year. So I'm just going to give an introduction about the Ford Foundation. It's a very big foundation. It was created a while ago by the Ford family, and everyone always asks if it was the same Ford family as the motor company, and the answer to that is yes, although they did divest from the motor company in the 70s and became their own public foundation. It was essentially founded to help society, fund like higher science education, different charitable organizations, all for the public welfare. So nowadays, it does support a lot of different areas. And this is something that I really like about the Ford Foundation and the Predoctoral Fellowship as well. It doesn't only focus in STEM. They really look at other sciences like sociology and also the environment or the arts. So there's a really big, diverse group of people that are part of this foundation and the fellowship as well. So that is something very unique about this fellowship that is one of its strengths, I would say. It is one of the most wealthiest charitable foundations. With about $12 billion. And that might be even more because this was data from maybe a year ago. So there's a link in this slide as well if you are interested in learning more about the Ford Foundation organization. And so part of the Ford Foundation programs, they have the fellowship program. So they're actually more focused into sharing, giving funds to organizations and not individuals. So this specific umbrella of the fellowship program is a small part of the organization. The fellowships are offered through the National Academy of Sciences, and there are three main goals of this fellowship, and they all have a common theme of education and diversity. So I'm just gonna read them out loud. Number one, increase faculty ethnic and racial diversity at U.S. colleges and university. Number two, maximize educational benefits of diversity. And number three, increase the number of professors who can and will use diversity as a resource for enriching the education of all students. So from the starting point, I just want to make really clear that this fellowship is really, it's really focused on diversifying the academic faculty. and also trying to increase the number of ways that we can teach to diverse students, and how we can use our cultural background, our different, social development background and everything to just make education better for people from diverse backgrounds. So if you really know that you are not interested in teaching in your academic, in your future careers, this is probably not the best fellowship for you. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be super sure about this right now, but if in your career goals, you think that that is something you would like to do, and that is kind of strongly driving your career right now, you should apply. It doesn't matter if you really, end up being an academic or not. The important thing is that right now, your career goals are aligned with the goals of this foundation. So I just want to make that clear. They have 3 different types of fellowships, and today we're going to talk about the predoctoral one, but they also have dissertation fellowships and postdoctoral fellowships. So for those of you who are maybe further along into the PhD program, if you have at least 2 years left, you should be looking at the dissertation fellowship. And if you're obviously already a doctoral, you should look at the postdoctoral fellowship. But today we will be talking about predoctoral fellowship, and overall an estimate of how many of these fellowships they give every year are here on the screen. So they give around 70 predoctoral awards every year, and in this specific year they have stated that we'll give 75. So that is, a small number compared to other types of fellowships. For example, the NSF, which is one of the most well-known fellowships out there, they give out thousands of fellowships every year. So the nature of how many fellowships they give obviously makes the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship more competitive than others like the NSF. So just keep that in mind, but please don't be, don't let this defer you from, applying and giving yourself the opportunity of being part of this fellowship program.
Rocío, before you move on to the next slide, we actually have a question related to number 3 that you mentioned there, right? The goals of the fellowship. So Nia asked, is teaching limited to becoming a professor or a PI, or does it extend to someone who's interested in doing SciComm work?
I do think that I remember getting this question last year, and I kind of went back to their FAQ section, and I do believe that you have to be teaching at a US college or university. I don't think that is, necessarily have to be linked with a PI, like a laboratory research environment. But you do have to be teaching, your goals have to be geared towards teaching at a college or university level. Yes. Okay. To date, there's more than 3,000 Ford Fellows. That number increased over the past year as well. But if you're interested in knowing some of these fellows, you can go to this link and just kind of search. I think you can search by area, college, university, etc., to try to identify people in your community that have been awarded the Ford Fellowship. Okay, so why should you apply to the Predoctoral Ford Fellowship? There's many different reasons. And one of them, of course, is because it's free. We will spend time working in the application, and that is valuable. But I feel like it's a great exercise to go through if you're thinking about, having a career in academia, or if you're a grad student, having the opportunity to write this fellowship, I think is very unique. As we will go through the different application components, you will see that the space is very limited, and it's very hard to convey everything that you want to tell them in 2 pages double spaced. So it's quite challenging to put this fellowship together just because there's almost no space to write. But I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to have that exercise and just be like, okay, how can I concisely write my project aims or like my personal statement, my background as a researcher, etc. So there's two great reasons right there. Of course, they cover $27,000 of your stipend for 3 years. And this was increased. I think when I started, it was $25,000. So the possibility is that this will continue to increase in the upcoming years. That money is 3 years of funding within a 5-year period. And something particular about the Ford is that if you apply this year, for example, and you get it, you will have to be in tenure, which means you have to have the fellowship in the following year. So I think they do this because, to my next point, they offer this amazing conference every year. And I think early on, they just want to make sure that every new fellow has the opportunity to meet everyone else in the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program. And it's an amazing conference. I can talk about it for hours, Daisy knows. But essentially, if you are on tenure in your following year after you apply, you can kind of take yourself off tenure after that first year. And this is beneficial if you have other sources of funding. You can kind of switch back and forward. And that is really helpful because that means you can have multiple fellowships. Although you can't have them in the same year, for example, they can both be on your CV and you can both be funded by different fellowships. So you can kind of switch back and forward as long as you use them within the 5 years from when you got awarded the fellowship. So if you have any questions about that specifically, please ask them in the chat. I know sometimes it's a confusing point. So another point is that some schools will actually give you a bonus if you get an external fellowship. And I think this is just an incentive for students to try to get external funding. At my university, for example, if the salary was $34,000 and I got $27,000 from the Ford Fellowship, the university will match your stipend so that you get paid $34,000 equal to your fellow grad students, but they might also give you a bonus. $1,000, $2,000, up to $4,000 is what I've heard or I know from at least Yale, but I know other institutions do it as well. So it's also an opportunity to increase your salary, which is obviously great as a graduate student. Yeah, the conference is amazing. It's just, I felt like everyone knew me from the moment I stepped into the room. Obviously, I think now it's going to be virtual, but I've also attended the virtual conference and given a workshop there, and it's equally amazing. But it's just, they really care about you. And I felt like some of them even like remembered my application and they'd be like, yeah, okay, like you were interested in this, like, look, this other person right here, they're also interested in this. And they would like, you know, try to network. And they really care about you. And I really felt like I was part of a family. And I also love that the conference does not only focus on, you know, career and professional development. Like, of course, they have, you know, grant writing sessions, applying to postdocs and faculty positions, how to be on the job market, those types of workshops. But they also have a lot of stuff about, you know, workshops on social justice or how to build a grassroots movement, and just so many other things involving, you know, diversity initiatives in STEM and academia, as well as mental health, like all these different things that, you know, belong in a scientific conference, but we normally don't see them. So it's just an amazing opportunity. And to be able to form part of that family is just something amazing. So yeah, very active and amazing community that will for sure, you know, be encouraging you throughout your career. There's people who have been Ford Fellows for decades and they still, you know, are very much connected to each other and supporting each other and trying to help out each other. So it's a great opportunity. So who is eligible to apply? Basically, everyone who is a US citizen, but also US nationals and permanent residents. Students who are currently under DACA or whose status has lapsed, but they still meet the criteria for DACA. Also, Indigenous individuals who are under the Jay Treaty of 1794, which basically means Indigenous people from Canada that can live and work freely in the United States. And political asylees, refugees, regardless of race, national origin, religion, gender, age, disability, or sexual orientation. So it's a little bit more broad than other fellowships. Like the NSF, for example, where only, I believe, US citizens are eligible to apply. Besides these eligibility criteria, there are also certain things that you have to comply with, obviously, to apply to this fellowship. And again, bolded is your commitment to a career in teaching and research at a college or university level. So that, you have to be committed to being in a teaching position in the future. You also have to be enrolled in a PhD or Science D program. And you have to either be in your first year, second year, or even third year, as long as you can demonstrate that you have at least 3 more years as of the fall of the next year. So if you're applying in 2021 in your third year, you have to demonstrate that as of fall of 2022, you still have minimum 3 years to complete. That means your PhD will be 6 years, which is pretty common. So, if you're first or third year, you can apply. Also, if you are a undergraduate student who is applying to a PhD or Science D degree in the fall, you can also apply. Not eligible are any type of professional degrees like Science D, psychology, doctors of psychology, medicine, law, public health, master's students, combined degrees like MD PhDs or JD PhDs are also not eligible to apply. So only PhDs and Science D degrees. So these are positive factors for selection, and they state this in their webpage. And I think it's important to just go over them. These are things that are not required, but obviously are things that will help your application get funded. So you should at least, try to read this and see if these align with what your, goals in your career are. So you do have to demonstrate academic achievements, and we always talk about this sometimes in terms of your GPA, but that is not the extent of it. If you've had a successful research career as an undergrad or your time as far as a PhD, that is also a significant academic achievement. Any honors that you have gotten from your extracurricular activities, there's multiple ways of being successful, in academic settings. So don't be also discouraged from applying if you think that your GPA is not good enough. Just don't put those barriers yourself. Just apply and let them determine, if you will get the fellowship or not. Just don't be discouraged if you think that you don't meet certain criteria. You have to have demonstrated a promise of continuing, being successful, specifically as a teacher, and that aligns with, their goal of funding and diversifying the faculty in academic settings. You should talk in your application about any experience you have had teaching students from diverse backgrounds. And that doesn't have to be necessarily, in a classroom setting, because a lot of us didn't have that opportunity, when we were in high school or even in undergrad. It is difficult sometimes to get that. But we think about teaching, it could be any type of setting. If you're in a social event and you're just talking to someone about a specific thing that you have learned or something that you're interested in, and that person learns something from you, that is an environment that involves teaching. So just think about that. It doesn't have to be necessarily in a classroom if you don't have that experience. You do have to obviously demonstrate that you're committed to helping communities that are underrepresented in the academy. And that could be through different outreach initiatives, mentorship programs, if you're involved with different organizations in your undergrad or in your school that have developed programs to help these communities. You should talk about that in your personal statement and research statements. If you have demonstrated that you can use your specific, experiences as a person from either a diverse background or for a particular, socioeconomic background, if you can use that experience that you have to convey a message to someone and teach someone about something that maybe in a normal class environment, like they wouldn't have been able to learn that, like you should also talk about that in your experiences. Like I think we had a student last year who had the challenge of teaching during Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico when there was like no electricity, and they like literally had to make this classroom like outside, and they would just like sit around, and like the challenges that she had to go through and how she basically used her experience, what she was going through and everyone else was going through at that moment, to just make it work for the students and still be able to educate them and get them, to do the curriculum or whatever they needed to do in the class. So anything that, you had to kind of adapt in order to teach a group of students or someone else, that is basically what they're talking about in this point. And of course, if you're a member of one of these groups that are underrepresented in academic settings, which is a lot of different groups, including, ethnic or racial groups, as well as, if you belong to one of the LGBTQ communities, or if you have certain disabilities, like there's many ways and many different groups who are underrepresented in the sciences. And if that's not clear, you can go to their webpage as well. And they have a nice description of everyone who falls within one of these groups that are underrepresented in the sciences. Okay, so this is a general background of the criteria and positive factors for selection. This is a timeline of the application process this year. So the application is open right now, so you can already, start working on your materials. The predoctoral deadline is December 16, 2021, and that's 5 p.m. Eastern time. However, that is a deadline for the three main statements, which is your research statement, your personal statement, and the statement of previous research or scholarly productivity. I still can't remember exactly what it's called, but essentially your experience as a researcher. And then supplementary materials are due later in January 6, 2022. And those include transcripts, some verification forms that your, I think, mentor has to sign, letters of recommendation, and a host letter. And we'll talk about what those are later on. And they will notify you around March of their decision, which is right about the time I think other fellowships notify everyone as well. Okay, so let's get into the different components of the application. We have a personal statement, which is 2 pages, double space, describing your motivation to do a PhD, any involvements that you've had with extracurricular activities, or anything that you have helped organize that will positively impact underrepresented communities, any teaching experiences. And like I said, that is very diverse. It doesn't have to be in a classroom setting. And also you should talk about yourself, how have your life experiences, how has your background has shaped you to become the person you are now, and how it will positively impact the person you will be in the future, hopefully, how will you use that in a positive way to teach students in a US college or university? So it's double spaced, like I said. So basically it's really one page. And this comes back to the challenges of writing this essay and all the components of this fellowship, honestly. So I just recommend that you start early and like just give those drafts to multiple people, have the goals and what they're looking for every statement super clear, and just make it really easy to read. So I will show some snapshots of some of my statements and go over just like the structure I used, and hopefully that will help. So this is how I started my research statement. So essentially, I started by describing why I am doing a PhD. And in my, particular case, I, was really interested in medicine, as most of us are when I got into college, but then I had a research experience and I was interested. So I came to the US, and then I was like slapped in the face, like, you don't belong here. Like, no one looks like you. There's no Hispanic faculty or any faculty of color in this place. And it was just like a slap in the face for me because, in Puerto Rico, like everyone is Puerto Rican. So like, you don't really feel out of place. Everyone is kind of like you. So that experience of like, I don't belong and like, this is not a space for me, that many of you feel like ever since you start school in the US, I just didn't have to deal with until I got, into these research programs at universities. And it was just like so shocking for me. And, it scared me, but at the same time, it really kind of motivated me to like, this can't be like this, like we have to change it. And it was one of my main, just one of the main things that really pushed me towards a career in academia early on. So you talk about whatever, your path has been to, get a PhD. So yeah, what got you interested in pursuing academia as well. I also basically, talked about and demonstrated that I have a track record of, being involved in a lot of outreach initiatives in STEM. This could be, as early as high school. If those were significant experiences that shaped who you are as a person right now, you should talk about that. It doesn't matter if it was, 10 years ago or whatever. I always say that you should pick those experiences that you can really talk about in depth, and like the experiences that were more pivotal for your development as a human being and professionally. So it could have been high school, undergrad, grad school, whatever, as well as highlighting any teaching experiences. And I talk about, I didn't have the opportunity to actually teach in a classroom until I got to grad school, but I had opportunities of teaching in other ways. In high school, for example, like I would give math tutoring, to some of my friends, or like, elementary school kids, just because, that was a teaching experience that you can talk about, as well as if you taught maybe in research settings, if you had people that you had to mentor in the lab, for example, that is also a teaching experience. So any opportunity where you can highlight your skills and experience in teaching in whatever shape or form, you should talk about that. So after that, I moved in my personal statement to talking about what I'm currently doing outside of the lab. And this is when I was a second year, I think. So at that moment, I was involved in different organizations at Yale that were also, organizing and developing different activities to really impact the community of, diverse students in the PhD. But I was also involved in, this clinic that Yale had in the major like Hispanic community here in New Haven, and how I went there and basically like served as a translator for the patients in that clinic. So anything that you're doing that's positively impacting the community around you, you should talk about. And lastly, say, why you are doing those things. Don't just like state like, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, like I'm doing this because, I really want to develop, the skills in this area that will help me be a better communicator, that will help me gain better perspective, understand like people from different backgrounds, and that will help me become a better educator, a better just professional in the future, because I want to impact the community in this and that way. So try to be a little bit more, explain why you're doing the things you're doing and how is that going to impact positively your future as an academic. And you also have to be very kind of blunt. You have to think about it when the reviewers are looking at these, they really kind of have like a checkbox itemized list of like, they have to talk about this, they have to demonstrate this, So the easiest you can make it for them to be like, yes, like, they talked about this, they talked about that. The better you're doing it, for them. It's just better if you are really like pointed with what you're saying. So I literally wrote, at the end, I'm applying to this fellowship, because being awarded this fellowship will significantly impact my chances of being successful in graduate school, and being successful in graduate school will help me get a competitive postdoc that will also put me at a better place to get a job in academia. And once I'm in academia, I want to do all these things to help my community and diversify STEM and do all these things. So you have to be like really pointed with what you're saying, and really demonstrate and tell them why you deserve to be awarded this fellowship. And I know that for some of us, it's really difficult. Like at the start, I was just like, I still don't like talking about myself and like, in that way, but like, this is just unfortunately how it is for these fellowships. And, we're worth it. We are amazing. Like, even though you don't like to talk about it that way, like we all are. So don't be afraid to really just like put that on a paper and be like, yeah, I am amazing because of these things, and I deserve this fellowship because of that. So just saying. Okay. So the next component is the research statement. And this is 3 pages, also double space. And here you're going to talk a little bit more about your previous research experiences. You do have to describe, what you did scientifically, but I think the most important thing is highlight what those experiences taught you, how they helped you shape you as a better teacher or as a better research scientist, how they help you get to where you are today. So you should talk about what you learned from those experiences more so than what technique you learned, You should also highlight here any previous publications of any form, any oral presentations, poster presentations, any awards that you've gotten at conferences, travel awards, anything that you can highlight that really highlights also your success in, giving a talk. That's a very important part of teaching, for example, being a very successful, speaker. So anything that you can kind of highlight that you have had experiences with, you should put here. And like I said, travel awards and other conferences as well. And I do think that there is a part in the actual page when you're filling out the application where you can list awards and honors. So kind of balance those out, like what you think should be highlighted in this 3 pages versus what you're going to put over there, because you are limited in space. So you kind of want to highlight the things that will, show and demonstrate that you are successful. So this is part of my research statement. I don't think I'm showing much of my past research experience, but essentially, like I said, just be very succinct. Like, I was at this university and my project was looking at this. The question was addressed in this way. This is what I learned. And overall, you can talk about this experience has really taught me how to communicate effectively in English, for example, was one of my things, because I didn't really get that experience like in my undergrad, because everyone talks Spanish. So that was very important for me if I want to, make it as a professor here. Or just I had to mentor someone, like during that research experience. And that really taught me leadership skills and decision-making skills and all of these different things. So like I said, don't focus on technical things because it doesn't really matter. As I mentioned, highlight what you learned, what made you better as a scientist, leader, etc. And this is how I listed publications, talks, and posters that I had. This was at the end of my research statement. And it helps, if you put like year, for example, because this helps highlight, okay, like they've been doing this for a little while. For example, if you have been giving talks and stuff in your undergrad, for example, that's a good way of showing them that you have been committed to this for a long time. And again, like publications are not needed. It's not something that you need to have. Of course, like it helps if you have them, but there's other ways where you can highlight these, talks and poster presentations as well are great to have listed here. Okay, so the third essay is a research proposal. And this is essentially where you tell them what you're going to do in grad school, but it's not the most important part of this statement, surprisingly. They give you 2 pages, double space, and you have to address all of these different things. You have to obviously give a background on what your area of study is and what your question is. So you should start with that. You should also talk why the institution that you're in is great for what you're doing, which can be a little tricky, but there's always ways of talking about that. You should talk about the courses that you take in grad school and how are those going to help you, complete your research program, which sometimes, is relevant and sometimes is irrelevant, but you still have to talk about it. And I can show you how I did that in my statement. You should obviously talk about general methods and a timeline. And a good way of talking about a timeline is essentially like putting it in aims, right? Because we usually think about the different aims as being, okay, aim 1 is what you're going to do first, aim 2, you're going to do second, and aim 3, you're going to do third, for example. So that's like a subtle way of kind of giving them a timeline without really getting into like the details of that. And you also, again, should talk about your career goals and how this fellowship will help you get there. So that's just super important. And I talked about it in my personal statement, in my research background statement, and in this statement. So everywhere you can put what your career goals are and how these fellowship is going to help you get there, you should talk about that. And also you should talk about how your research is going to impact the community. And there's different ways of doing that as well. I know that for some of you, if your research is a little bit more translational, then of course it's going to be like, okay, yeah, like this disease or whatever. And that's obviously going to impact community, but there's always a way of finding that, even with basic science research. So find those ways to connect it to the community. And you can also impact the community via the things you're going to do while you're in grad school. It doesn't have to be necessarily through your research. You can talk about my involvement in these organizations, and like, this is how I'm going to impact my community in my time at this institution, or how you're going to impact the community once you get into that, teaching position in the future. So there's always ways of talking about this if you feel like your research, is not going to directly or doesn't have a direct connection right now to your community and society. So this is an example of how I structured my research proposal. And overall, make it easy to read, as if with all of your statements, you should just make it very easy for them to read. But in this one in particular, because there were so many different things they were looking for, I was really, purposeful of using paragraphs, of using like underline, like bullet points, bolding, things like all of that can help them identify, okay, this thing, that thing, like all of that can help you just structure it like that, because it's going to make it a lot easier for them. And if your proposal is easy to read, the chances you're going to get funded are a lot more likely. So I started with a short background, paragraph of the field I'm in and the specific question that we're addressing, as well as why the lab and the institution that I'm in are, great for studying this. And you can always, the labs are, obviously, if they have a lab, like it means they're an expert in that field. So like, there's no better place to study where you're going to study than in that lab. So you can always kind of make that statement. I did put relevant coursework, and this was a little bit of a stretch for me. Like, I don't know what Daisy's experiences is, but I felt like, honestly, my coursework here I don't think it really impacted my research, but you should talk about how it will, even if it doesn't. So the most I could go, honestly, with was we do have to give like seminars, which I think is very common for all the different PhD programs as a class. And you can talk about that. That is a great way of, honing in on your presentation skills, on your, oral presentation, which will obviously impact how effective you will be as a communicator, which will make you a better teacher. So you can kind of talk of all of that in this section if you feel like the coursework doesn't really, is relevant. So yeah. Methods. So this is nothing. This is the actual proposal, like I said, and this is called the research proposal. So as you can see, it's like 3 paragraphs, not even paragraphs, like 2 sentences each about methods and the framework. So essentially, these are the methods I'm going to use, and this is my hypotheses. Very short, very to the point. 2 aims. I want to look at this in this specific setting. This is how we're going to do it. This is what we anticipate if our hypothesis is correct. So just super short. Aim 2 as well. So just be very concise with that, because as well, they're trying to check a lot of boxes in this statement. And so you just have to be very to the point with everything. And then at the end, I put all the information of how is my research going to impact the community? How am I going to impact the community? What my career goals are, and how I think this fellowship will help me, do all of these goals that I have. So again, a very short paragraph. I talked about obesity, which is what I study, but you put in there, whatever you're studying and how it might affect society in the future. And again, I talked about how getting this fellowship will just help me be more successful at grad school, which will obviously help me, become an academic in the future, and how I will hopefully impact society and my community once I'm in that academic setting. So there's always ways of writing these specific impact statements, I guess, is what I think the NSF calls them as well too.
Rocío. So before going to the 3rd statement, we have a few questions related to the proposed plan of study or research statement. We had one coming in early, and it's a good question, and it directly impacts the past 2 years of applicants of the cohorts, right? Do you have any advice for addressing how the pandemic has limited activities and research?
Yeah. I think it's a I think it's a reality for like every student who it was either first year, second year, or even applying to grad school during those times. So I think that you can always frame it in a way where you can maybe highlight, what at that time like taught you if you were applying to grad school through the pandemic. What were you had unique challenges, right? How did you handle those, or like how did you navigate through that? How do you think that experience will positively impact, how you start your career as a grad student? Maybe it's gonna make you have a different approach to certain things, especially like in the future if you're teaching, your flexibility with certain things, or like I do feel like, there is a uniqueness of the pandemic that this generation has, that I think you can use in your advantage when you're writing about this. You had to adapt to so many different ways of learning virtually, especially. I'm sure you learned tons about that, and maybe there's some improvements that you would like to make. I think you can really leverage that to your advantage and just describe like being and learning in this super different environment really change your perception of what education is and what can we do to really teach students in diverse ways. So, everyone's experience is different, but I do think that it brings a unique opportunity to talk about that and just spin it in a positive way in terms of how it taught you and yeah, how it has impacted you as a student. And yeah.
That was great. That reminded me of someone who studies neuroscience and computational neuroscience over Columbia, and from the pandemic, right? So she actually partaking like a lot more outreach, and so she was super into 3D printing. And so I think like as a form of outreach, she like put into like little like sandwich like plastic bags, like all the stuff that she 3D printed out, and then just like sent them off to kids at like our local like, elementary schools in the area, and so stuff like that. And that wasn't directly related with research, and so she taught in that sense.
Exactly.
I have two questions. They're both similar, and it's related. I believe they are they're applying to grad schools. So they ask, for the research proposal, do you have to choose a specific institution and program? And if that's the case, when you do get awarded, would the fellowship be limited to only that program and that institution? And so how can you say that that institution is like the best fit in this case?
Yeah, so if you are applying this year, right, to the PhD program, I think in that section, you should write about why you're choosing these institutions, right? Like if you're interested in neuroscience, for example, then you should say, there are certain labs in these places that work with these specific questions that I'm interested in, and they have these unique, either oh my God, how do you call these, like specific, machines, or like just spaces where you can do this research that you couldn't do it anywhere else. And just framing it in that way is better. Like, why are you choosing these institutions to apply to? But if you do get the fellowship, it's not limited to that, like obviously no one knows where you're going to end up like in a year. So the fellowship funds you, and like wherever you go, the fellowship will go. So you're not limited in that, as long as you can demonstrate that you're applying to these institutions because of specific reasons that line up with your, research interests or career goals. Like, you're fine.
Okay, and then two other small questions. Should citations also be included in the research proposal?
Yes, that counts towards that. Honestly, I think I didn't put any, and I don't think that's bad. They really specify that also in their FAQ. They're like, if you wish to put citations, which I took as like, I'm not going to put citations because I just didn't. I was like, there's no space here. There's absolutely no space, and it's fine. Like, I don't think it's necessary. If you have the space, by all means, like, do it. But if you really find that you don't have space to put research of references, you don't have to do it. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then one last one, and this reminds me of the NIH F31 actually. And so this is a question. So did you include, and you touched upon this as well, when you're talking about the aims, did you include an expected timeline of finishing your aims in proposal?
I actually don't think I specifically did that. Look at here. I didn't put a specific timeline. However, I do think that, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the verification forms or something, I think your mentor, or if you're an undergrad not your research mentor, your PI, but whoever. I think they do have to basically say like, it'll take you at least 3 years to complete this program. And so I think that's kind of an indirect way of addressing that question. You can, include that. It won't take too long to add, at the end of each of these aims, like we anticipate that this will take 2 years, or however much long. You can add that as well, but I don't think it's necessarily required. I think the aim structure provides at least like a timeline of things. And just the fact that you're applying and that your research mentor is signing this is evidence that you will be here at least 3 more years. So yeah, I don't think you absolutely have to. I don't think I did.
Awesome. Good.
Okay. I also see a question in the chat. Someone asked, is there a limitation of how many times a candidate can apply for the Ford Fellowship? The answer is no. I think I know someone who applied 2 times and got an honorable mention the first time, and the second time they got the award. So as long as you can apply, as long as you have 3 years, technically 4 years when you're applying, right, left, I would keep applying if you haven't gotten it yet, because there's nothing to lose, and if you really want a chance to be part of the fellowship program, I feel like you should keep applying as long as you're eligible. Okay. So so those were our 3 main research statements, and personal statement, background statement, and research statement. As part of the supplementary materials, you will have to submit transcripts. They don't have to be official. I think you do have to submit an official one if you get the offer, but you can submit unofficial transcripts in the meantime. 3 to 5 letters of recommendation, and I strongly encourage you to reach out to at least 4 people, just in case one of them doesn't, submit it by the deadline. Because if you don't have 3 letters by the deadline, your application will not be reviewed. And I think they're pretty strict on deadlines. So just make sure that you have enough space to wiggle, around, so you actually have 3 letters of recommendation. And for these letters, I recommend that you ask faculty who maybe know you in different environments. So I think I asked, 2 of my research mentors. And those could be mentors from summer experiences, or if you did like a semester of research, it doesn't have to be like a super long research experience, as long as they can speak about your, ability as a research, in a research environment. It could be your PI from undergrad, or if you know faculty where you really, enjoyed a class, or like where you, really did a positive impact on the faculty, like you can also reach out to them so they can speak about you as a student. If there's any other faculty that maybe is involved in some of the outreach initiatives that you have done in the past, you should also ask them to write a letter. So try to diversify a little bit, but if you end up having, 3 letters of recommendation from, research PIs, that's fine. Just in case you don't have 3 research PIs, there's other ways you can look for recommenders. And so I know that some people, maybe have anxiety, or like just don't know necessarily how to ask sometimes for letters of recommendation, but just remind yourselves that it's kind of part of their job to write letters of rec. So no one's going to get mad at you for asking for a letter of recommendation. Just do it with enough time in advance. I would say, if the deadline for the letters is January 6th, I would ask them like right now in October, I mean, we're in September, but just like the earliest you know that you're going to apply, just reach out to them. If you haven't talked to them for a while, give them a brief update of what you're doing. I would also maybe do in bullet points, you know, this is what this fellowship is looking for, because it's important for them to write a letter that can, they can speak about, right, those specific things that they're looking for and why you're a good fit and all of that. And you should also share with them your application materials. They might not even read them, but anything that you can, you know, provide them so they can write you the best letter that they can is very much appreciated. So just tell them with enough time, and, you know, if they don't reply in like a week or two, just like resend it again. And yeah, no one's going to get mad at you. So just, yeah, it's part of their job description. So, okay. So yeah, I think that's the end of my talk for you guys today. Here are some resources to prepare a competitive application from different sources. And you can also go to their webpage, which is actually very helpful. They have a lot of different links where you can go to FAQ. Also, they have like a nice little printout, like a little pamphlet of this year's application. And they describe a lot of the things we talked about today. And I know that Científico Latino on their page also has an example. I think it's mine, but I can't remember if it's that one or the, but they do have examples of the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship successful applications. So you can also go there and look at those examples. And you can also look at the database that they have of Ford Fellows. And they have what they called regional liaisons, which basically means faculty in different areas of the US. And you can look at, you know, who's in your institution or who's in your area, for example. And they're also great resources for you to reach out to, maybe even like ask, you know, for any advice for writing your application, etc. So you can look at those regional liaisons as well. And they're usually faculty at institutions. And they're great in my experience. So please reach out to them if you have any questions or, you know, you want them to look over something.
Okay, I was just putting those in a chat. We actually have two questions. One of them is that came in earlier. How similar were the applications, or are there applications between the Ford and the NSF? I know that for the NSF, clinical relevancy is a big no-no. And can you explain again how you can hold more than one, you know, funding sources or fellowships under these specifications?
Mm-hmm. So they are similar in ways, right? You can kind of use certain things. I use certain things, you know, for both of them. But the way you structure them to me is very different, because the Ford is just looking for a very different type of applicant. You definitely have to work on that by itself. I remember initially I kind of like tried, like, you know, I did my NSF first, and then I kind of like cut a bunch of stuff so it would fit the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship limits. And my PI was basically like, no. This is not what they're looking for. You need to rewrite this. Because it was very evident, right? Like if you're writing something for something else, and, you know, like you should really try to like tailor it to the predoctoral fellowship. As you said, they don't have the clinical, right? Like your research can be on anything. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but yeah, it's not even limited to STEM. So they have a lot of diverse applicants. So yeah, they are similar, but they're different. I feel like you definitely have to be a lot more pointed in the Ford Fellows application with what your career goal is, and how are you going to impact the community with that. And the NSF, I don't think that's a huge deal. You do have to write like a broader impact statement, but that can be anything, you know. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I want to teach, and, you know, in the Ford, you really do have to do that. I would say that's how they're different. And then the second question was, how can you have 2 fellowships or more when you're in grad school? So I can speak about the NSF and the Ford. I got them both in my second year. And so I basically accepted them both. And what happens is you can accept them both, but you can't be on tenure. So they call it on tenure when they're actually funding you that year, right? Because they give you 3 years within 5 years. So you can't be on tenure for both of them in the same year. And what I did was I got both of them. My third year, I had to be on the Ford because that's required with the Ford. So I put my NSF on deferral essentially that year. So I was on the Ford my third year, and then I switched to the NSF on my fourth year, and I think my fifth year as well. And then after my fifth year, I switched back to the Ford. So with each one of these fellowships, of course, these are 2 specific ones. I know that different ones have different, funding time, but each of them gave me 3 years for 5 years. So that means I could play around with them a little bit in order to have funding with both of them, even though not in the same year. If that makes sense. I hope that was clear.
Okay. And then for the last one, it's related to your one of the last slides, right? Is your application less strong if you only have 3 letters of rec when you can go up to 5?
No, I don't think it's I don't think it really, I think unless you feel like all these different 5 people, for example, can speak very uniquely about you, I don't think there is a difference between, having 3 or having 5. For example, if you have 3 that are researchers, but then a 4th one can really speak about your involvement in outreach or teaching, like that definitely will add, right? Because of the goals of the fellowship. But it is not frowned upon, or you shouldn't aim to have 5, really only if you really think it'll benefit you. Just don't put 5, because you're also risking kind of having 5 just for having 5, and maybe 1 or 2 of those people can't really write you a strong letter. If you know 5 people that can write you a strong letter of recommendation, by all means do it, but it's not just a numbers game. So unless you are really sure that those people all can write you a strong letter, don't ask 5 people just for having 5, essentially.
Yeah. I've heard, less is more, and I heard that if you have 3 very strong letters, and then you have for 5, 3 of the 5 is really strong, 2 is lukewarm, as Rocío mentioned, that can actually hurt.
Yeah.
What Rocío said. Okay. Alrighty. And we're gonna take one last question. It's from David. Is it a good idea to get a recommendation from a faculty member in your current PhD program if you've recently just started the program? So I'm assuming first year, and they don't know you that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I did this actually when I started grad school. It was the last year that the NSF. Basically, I applied 2 times because it was the last year you could actually do that. That's how old I am. But essentially, I asked my rotation PI at the moment to write me a letter because the research proposal I wrote was based on that rotation. Mm-hmm. And that can be good. They don't know you as well, but they're very likely to write you a strong letter because there is a possibility that you will join their lab. And of course, that is money that you're going to be bringing to them. So they are very highly motivated to write you a strong letter, and you can have that conversation with them. You don't know me that well, but here's my CV, here's all the things I've done in the past. Here's how I'm a strong candidate for this fellowship, as long as you provide them with that information. And as long as I feel like your proposal, especially if your proposal is based on their research, definitely. So yeah, there's nothing wrong about that. You just have to approach it the right way and provide them with enough information so they can write you a strong letter.
These were all very great questions. And also, like, thank you, Rocío, for, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, like enlightening us on everything, on your experience on the fellowship, and yeah, and also, you know, how do we address, right, our, you know, our current circumstances during the pandemic and tailoring our application towards that. Yeah, I guess we're gonna conclude because yes, it's the hour mark, and so thank you guys so much who, you know, who came, the ones who are with us on YouTube. Rocio for a second time. I'm honestly like I'm the one who I just feel really honored just you know, moderating both times with you, and so thank you so much for your time, Rocio, especially during this critical time for you. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Good night, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you, Rocío.
Please feel free to reach out if you have more questions. I think my email is maybe shared.
I'll post all the hyperlinks that you have in the description box of YouTube so everyone can see it. And I'll, if you're comfortable, I'll also put it in the description box, your contact. Yeah. So guys, watch out for that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yes. Thank you everyone for coming.
Good luck, everyone. Thank you.